Warning, the following video is a bit scary, even for me, the guy who recorded it. I do not recommend you watch this video in a dark room alone. This is probably the scariest video I've ever made. It wasn't done on purpose. My only goal for this video was to shed light on the subject of what happened to me in 2011. John Razimus here with Pyramidikal. In this episode, I'm going to detail the events when the Poltergeist attacked me in the year 2011. It was midway between my stay there, and it was not sleep paralysis, I'll tell you that. I've misquoted the name of the movie in the past because it was 5 years ago now. But upon looking for it and searching for it and matching up the scenes, I figured out that it was not... I thought it was Phantasm. I told David Lee Bahart and others that I thought it was Phantasm. And then looking up Phantasm, just the name Phantasm ringed a bell for some reason. When I looked up Phantasm, it was not that. So I had to find it. I had to really search for it. I had to search for 80s horror movies because it's not on Hulu anymore. It was on Hulu back in 2011. Contracts for Hulu, Netflix, the different streaming pages change from year to year. And they don't have it anymore, or at least the last time I checked. But I got the vinyl soundtrack for From Beyond. Here it is. It's pretty rare, and it's still in the plastic. H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond. And I collect vinyls, and when I saw this, I decided to get it. I haven't opened it. Maybe I won't open it. I don't remember the music too well. Probably generic, corny 80s horror music. So maybe it's pretty cool. There's a subtitle that I didn't even know existed when I posted that cover of the box from Phantasm. And the subtitle is, "Humans Are Such Easy Prey." The movie is literally a magnet, perhaps, for supernatural activity, or maybe not. I'm not big into horror movies. It's probably the only horror movie I ever watched while living in that room haunted by Poltergeist. And the Poltergeist never jumped on me and attacked me except for this one time. So here's what happened. It was around 10 p.m. I find an 80s movie I've never seen. I'm real big into looking for obscure 80s movies. And I find From Beyond. I watch 15 minutes of it. I get to the point where they turn on the device, and there's like astral creatures floating around. And the guy's like, whoa, there's some type of crazy, like ghost fish thing. I wonder if it can see us. And then he like tries to communicate with it, and it freaking bites him, or it tries to bite him. And then they immediately turn off the device. That's when I stopped the movie, around the 15-minute mark. And I didn't stop it because I was scared. Later in the movie, there are some pretty freaky scenes. They're pretty corny, But if you're in a dark room by yourself, they can be pretty scary. So this entity maybe thought I was scared by it, but I wasn't. I just prepared to go to sleep so I could have enough sleep, knowing that there's going to be a poltergeist probably annoying me all night long. This entity, it would bang things, knock stuff over. It was still pretty freaky, but after it happened 100 times, I got pretty used to it. But I still didn't like hearing it while trying to sleep. So I had a big fan going. I had a pillow over my ear. I had the fan up to maximum. And the entity... Okay, this is what happened. So I watched the movie for 15 minutes. I see that it's about 10:30, around there. I turn off my laptop. I turn off the light. It's not sleep paralysis. I literally turn off the light. Let's step through it how fast it happened. Click it off. Not a second after my head touched the pillow. Not 1 second fully wide awake. Literally, this fast. It jumped on me, all right? This entity jumped on me. I was not in any REM sleep. I was not having a dream. I was not in any sleep-like state. I wasn't drowsy. I was fully wide awake. The lights were off. So, it jumps on top of me. The entity had the weight of a large monkey or a small person. And it grabbed my throat pretty strongly. It grabbed my mouth pretty strongly. It grabbed 3 parts of my body. My throat, my mouth, and my tongue. So my tongue was bound, my mouth was bound, and my throat was bound. You see, these entities, they can stick their hands right through us. They're in a higher dimension. And I guess I annoyed it one too many times by saying it's wimpy, saying it's weak, saying it's about as strong as my pinky, saying its power is about as strong as one flick of my finger, and that's pretty close to how much power it had, except for maybe on a few occasions it did a few movements of objects that were a little bit stronger than that. I did not expect this would happen. I've been making videos for YouTube since 2007. I have 2 channels. I have an older channel. And I've never in my life ever seen this happen to my tripod during filming. You be the judge, but I don't think it was a coincidence. This is small, but probably the best video evidence I'll ever get. The door was closed. No one was in the room but me. I usually film alone at night by myself. I filmed this at around 11 p.m. today, August 19th, 2016. The lights were off. So, it jumps on top of me. The entity had the weight of a large monkey. Then the sign turned off. This is the first time the sign turned off during filming. I guess I annoyed it one too many times by saying it's wimpy, saying it's weak, saying it's about as strong as my pinky, saying its power is about as strong as one flick of my finger. Perhaps the sign turning off was the entity as well, but it could have been a loose wire. But as for the tripod being jiggled, I do believe it was an entity. So, it jumps on top of me. It jumps on top of me. It jumps on top of me. This is very freaky to me. It tells me there is an entity in my room that has at least minimally the ability to move things. This is not a joke. There's one thing I forgot to mention when making this video. One warning I would like to warn everyone with concerning these entities. Do not try to communicate with them whatsoever under any circumstances other than to tell them to leave occasionally if they are getting too bothersome. They've always been there for the most part and will always be there, so do not be afraid. They feed off of fear. Fear is their main power. If you fear them not, they will have no power. As FDR said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. So we can coexist with them. Telling them to leave excessively can annoy them. It can actually cause the activity to increase, so do so at your own risk. The number one warning I would like to give is do not talk to them. Do not give them a name. Do not try to form a relationship with them. Their job is to watch you, basically. Do not stoop to the level of black magic practitioners. Do not make pacts with them. 99% of the communication I've given them involved me asking them to leave or commanding them to leave. 1% involved joking to try to diffuse the situation, but I do not recommend small talk. Give them their space, let them do their job, and don't bother them. If you feel the need to get a priest to bless your house or room, feel free to do that. But if they are assigned to you or your plot of land, there may be little you can do to force them to leave, is my opinion. Again, I stress my warning, do not communicate with them. Communication is the first step to becoming friends with them, and you do not want them as your friend. They will only seek to trick you and destroy you. It's their nature. Maybe it did a few. We're talking maybe 6 times it pushed things down that would have been stronger than this. But most of the time, its movements of knocking objects over were no stronger than being able to flick something like that down. Like a cup, usually a half-filled bottle of water, stuff like that. This entity had a humanoid form. I believe it had 2 feet, 2 legs, if I could guess, but it wasn't 100% invisible to me. It was 100% optically invisible. I believe it just had the power in this room to manifest the ability to move objects in our dimension. Like I said before, I believe it was in the 5th dimension at least, or maybe the halfway between the 5th dimension and our dimension. We are in the 3rd/4th dimension. So it's reaching over, and it could stick its hand right through my mouth and bind my tongue. It could bind, maybe it had 3 hands, maybe it had 4 hands. Maybe this was 2 entities helping each other. All I know is for about 1 minute, for about 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 1.5 minutes, I was in this position of struggling. Upright, struggling. Right after, no sleeping taking place, no dreaming taking place. So my mouth is bound, my tongue is bound, my throat is bound. And I'm like fighting this thing. And I'm not paralyzed. It's not sleep paralysis. I can move around. So I'm moving around. I'm fighting this thing. I'm like, ugh. But I can't see it. And to be honest, I can't push it off me. Trying to do this doesn't have any effect on it. I couldn't push it. It could hurt, it could physically attack me, but I couldn't physically attack it. Because, let's face it, it was basically a spirit entity, and a negative one at that. Some people have questioned whether it was, maybe it was positive. maybe you didn't approach it from an open mind. When something jumps on top of me, grabs my throat, grabs my tongue, and grabs my mouth, that's an act of violence, and in no way, shape, or form, there is literally no way that this entity was anything other than evil. Now, pure evil? Probably. But I had the feeling, based on its size, that it was an imp demon. A smaller, lower level, lower ranking minion commanded to harass me for 6 months. I talked about in 2010, around Valentine's Day, I had an encounter with a high-ranking demon. I'll say this. The high-ranking demon's aura, if you will, its energy, I could feel, was the most dreadful, the most... perhaps it had the power of 1,000,000 negative spirits. All I know is extreme weight and extreme hatred, pure hatred, probably for me and all humans. I could feel it and sense it, and I'll talk about that. A lot of people want me to just spill every detail, but first of all, most people don't believe me. I'm writing a book. I've been working on it for about a year, and I want to release all the details of the high-ranking demon and this lower-ranking imp demon. And even though this imp was low-ranking, perhaps it had a special gift of being able to move objects. I have the impression that the ability to move and manipulate objects in our dimension is a rare talent, gift, or it's a rare vortex area which is conductive to an entity even having the ability to do that. There are a couple people on YouTube that I'm following and seeing if they also are experiencing poltergeist activity. But there are so many hoaxers out there that I don't know if it's real or a prank. But I do know that for 6 months straight, closer to 5.5 months, I experienced nonstop harassment. The entity would walk on Walmart. Occasionally I was messy, and I would throw Walmart plastic bags on the ground, just a couple here or there. And the entity would sometimes walk on them, so I could hear footprints walking on the Walmart bags. So I quickly made sure there were no Walmart bags on the floor of my room, because it was pretty freaky. Tiny stuff like that. It seems innocent and normal. Oh, maybe it's just the wind. No, it was an entity. Like I said, it pushed down the pillows. Let me go get the pillows real quick. They're in the garage. I still haven't recovered them, but the actual pillows that the entity pushed down and sat down on is literally impossible according to gravity. It's literally impossible. If anyone thinks I was living next to train tracks, I was not living next to a train. I was not living on a fault line. It wasn't an earthquake. This entity picked objects up a few times and played with objects. And I can't say that I ever saw levitation. I think levitation did take place a couple times, maybe 2 times. But he was in the pitch of blackness when I was trying to sleep. And I guess it was when I didn't have the pillow or the fan. Maybe early on, I heard what I believe to be levitation in the pitch blackness of attempting to sleep. This entity would harass me all night long. Just tiny things. For example, I often would have this on my table in the corner. Just some pencils or pens in a container like this, in a glass or whatnot, and it would play with them all night long. Just and then maybe you take I don't know if it took one out, but if it was laying on the table, this it could easily move this, and so stuff like this would, like I said, the strength of a flick might fly across the room like that. It was mostly bottled waters and stuff like that, to the point where I got pretty neat and tidy concerning small objects that it could move. Concerning it sitting down on things, it sat down on the pillows. I'm going to go get them so you can see the exact pillows that it sat down on. It sat down on every single object, every single surface in the entire room. I could hear it. You know the sound that is made when someone sits on something, like a creak, like I would hear that creak on every surface in the entire room. Until, guess what? Until the entity found out, hey, this stack of boxes is a little wobbly. Yeah. I'm going to save that wobbly stack of boxes for when he turns out the light and puts his head on his pillow, and bam, the entity would knock it over. And so sometimes I'd have to turn on the light in the middle of the night and clean up the room or whatever, but I just tried to get more neat and stacked things more carefully, and was more clean and picking up after myself. But no matter what I did, it would still knock and bang and play with stuff even under my bed. It would play with stuff in my closet, which leads me to believe that the boogeyman is based on a myth, possibly based on actual poltergeists, because it played with stuff under my bed. I could hear it. It played with stuff in my closet. The entity really liked the closet. It was pretty territorial about the closet. Didn't play with stuff under the bed too often, a couple times, but it really liked a corner. It liked a particular corner. And I've read a lot of books after the fact, never beforehand. Let's just put it this way. I can't think of ever reading a single occult book before these events. Not a single occult book. So people think I was delving into witchcraft or whatever. Nope. Not even close. I never have. I'm an anti-occultist, yet an occult researcher, because of these events that have happened to me. And even feng shui, I believe, sort of talks about the positive and negative corners of a room. And it led me to believe, maybe there's something to this feng shui. Maybe the ancient Chinese masters who invented it knew about these entities claiming a corner of a room. And I have other theories of why they claim corners of rooms and why they enter your rooms in the corner. They probably leave in the corner. It's all invisible, but they see our dimension differently than we see it. Even Joe Rogan has talked about how he's taken drugs, left his body, entered a higher dimension, and Joe Rogan thinks there's a good chance it's an actual dimension and not just a trip. And that he's met some entities, and that he looked down and he saw our dimension, and it looked weird. There's a bunch of fractal angles everywhere. So I think when they look at our dimension and they enter it, it's an abstract. They might just be seeing some wire framework. I know they have X-ray vision. They could see through everything. So perhaps a corner of a room is just an easy point they can see from their dimension. Obviously, we have no concept of what their dimension is like other than astrally traveling or leaving your body. Shamanism involves usually taking drugs, shamanistic drugs, leaving your body, and becoming enlightened and having contact with entities. These entities, in my opinion, are negative. I think a lot of the times they pretend they're positive, they pretend they're ascended masters, ascended Buddhist masters, or whatever religion. Maybe they'll appear as lizard people. Maybe they will appear as a regular person. Maybe they're going to appear as a horned gargoyle. But probably most of the time they're not going to appear like that. As far as seeing them, I can't say that I ever saw them during the 6 months in the Poltergeist house. But I have seen them a couple times in the concept of astrally while I'm sleeping. I was attacked a couple years, 2-3 years after this attack, and I do believe I did see a face. And the face that I did see, and that attack actually happened in this room. Now, so I have been attacked, sort of, but that was closer to sleep paralysis. So I was in the dreamlike state then. And I'm going to give science some credit. Sure, sleep paralysis might exist. But false sleep paralysis with actual demonic entities, actual negative higher dimensional entities, exists as well. Don't discount all attacks as mere scientifically assumed regular sleep paralysis. Because what I experienced was not sleep paralysis. I was fully wide awake. So how did I get out of the 2 minutes? How did I get out of the 2 minutes of being attacked? To be honest, and this is going to sound cliche, but I did ask on God's name. I was like, I couldn't speak. It was binding my tongue. So I had to think it in my head. I called on God's name. And I said, in God's name, get out of here. You don't have the power, whatever. I can't remember the exact words. I was extremely fearful because this entity was on top of me, grabbing me in my throat, my tongue, and my mouth, obviously trying to prevent me from speaking. So Napoleon Hill talks about the power in words, power in the spoken word. Napoleon Hill talks about how if you have a goal and you don't say it out loud, it's a less powerful goal. And casting out a negative entity is a lot more powerful if you use your actual voice as opposed to your mind. But your mind is strong enough. So what I did was I casted it out using repetitious thought of, in the name of God, get out of here. And I did use the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus, leave. And so I was saying this probably within the first 10 seconds of realizing I'm being chokeholded by a demonic entity. And as I said it for a minute and a half straight at least, eventually I could speak. Eventually I could open my mouth. Eventually I could move my tongue. But I think he was still holding my throat. But I could speak. And I spoke the words, get out of here, in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, get out of here. Finally left. But like I mentioned in a comment recently, it would always return 1 hour later, every single time. It's not the first time I casted it out in the name of God or in the name of Jesus. 1 hour later, it would always return. So every single time I would command it to leave, as long as I was adamant and actually commanded with conviction and actually believed that my words would cause it to leave, it did every single time. And let's face it, one night I probably commanded it to leave 5 times, separated by 5 hours. So yes, I could have done that every single night for, 5 hour, 5 times every night, but it got exhausting. And I felt the night that I did cast it out 5 times, that it ticked the crap out of it. It annoyed it. When I casted it out, when it came back, it would almost be twice as noisy. Poltergeist is translated into like noisy ghost or noisy spirit or something like that. And it was definitely that. So my theory is it had license to be there. It had permission to be there from higher spiritual sources. So perhaps it was a test from the highest source. I don't think I wouldn't have been given the test unless infinite intelligence of the universe knew I could withstand it. So obviously I could withstand it. I'm not psychotic or anything like that. I'm sane. I've made it through. But, it's taken some courage to even make these videos and post this. A lot of people are going to laugh and joke and think it's hilarious. But I'm not trolling. I'm not joking. It's not a scam. I'm not selling anything. I am writing a book, but that's down the road, and it's just a written account in greater detail. You don't have to buy it if you don't want. I'm self-publishing it. I don't know how much I'm going to sell it for. I'll probably make a PDF. Who knows? Really, really cheap, and I might give it away. But I just wanted to document it. Someone said it's important to write a journal, and I've never been into writing journals. But this is probably one of the most extreme events of my life. And so if there's any book or any written record of my life for future generations, this event might help them. Now, how could it help them? Well, perhaps the veil is breaking open and maybe the prophecies are all true. Or maybe it's something scientific. Maybe there's a solar cycle that rips through to the dimensions and causes this to happen every 1,000 years. I don't know. All I know is if it happened to me, it's going to happen to other people. I'm trying to just make a firm, adamant push to let other people know this is real. It's not fake. It's real. If you haven't experienced it, the first thing I always say is you're lucky. I almost wish I could go back, but as much as I think of it as a curse, I think of it as a blessing because I'm illuminated in the light, in the perspective of knowing there are invisible entities all around us. I don't know to what extent, but I know for a fact there are invisible entities around us on a regular basis. What their job is, you tell me. But the job of this entity was to harass me. It had a legal reason to be there. Perhaps it was a principality assigned to it, so maybe it's still there to this day. But I did ask 1 month after I moved out, trying to get my deposit back, I did ask the tenant who moved in and had lived there for a month. Then again, the first month I lived there, I really didn't experience much. Maybe he never experienced anything. Maybe it only bothers people that are targeted. I definitely was targeted a year prior by the higher ranking entity. So maybe the high-ranking entity assigned it to me, or maybe that's just a really haunted vortex of a house. There's no way for me to know. These things are all invisible. I don't claim to know everything. I'm just trying to pick apart and see and explore and come to some conclusion that makes sense. But the closest thing to proof I've ever been able to do is a few times. I've told this story not in any great detail to people, but I've probably told this story to a few dozen people in my life, in person. 1 out of 10 will believe me. The odds are about that bad. So I already know 90% of you are not going to believe it, or if you're here, maybe you will. Believe it or don't believe it. But it happened. I'm illuminated to the point where I know it's real. Here are the pillows that the entity actually sat on. These are the actual pillows. They've been in my garage for years. I planned on covering them. I bought a good 4 mid-century chairs, and the pillows are so expensive that I bought some pillows, and I ripped off the coverings. Some of the coverings were just really bad, but the foam was still good. And foam is really expensive, especially pre-cut, really nice foam like this. And even though it's yellow foam, and some of it's old, but you recover it with some brand new fabric, and perfect pillow for my chairs that I still have. So I haven't got around to covering them, but I had a stack of boxes, maybe 2 boxes, full of my stuff, 2 cardboard boxes, and these were on top of them. And I told this in a previous video, but as I locked the door in my room, I was standing about 1 foot away when the entity sat down on these pillows. Like I said, it pushed down about 1 inch, and that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. I'm holding a mic, so it's hard to reproduce it, but these pillows are not easy. They're not that easy to push down 2 inches. It easily went this far down. I mean, it was pretty far down. And like I said, it made a vague impression of a butt. And I never really thought about it in great detail, but the butt of a small person. Not a big person. But that's actually a great amount of pressure trying to reproduce that. And I still have the pillows. And I don't think the pillows are haunted, but those are actual pillows actually sat on by a demonic entity. But I'm not too worried about it because the demonic entity, in my opinion, demonic, or higher dimensional, whatever you want to call it, it sat on almost everything in my entire room. It kind of reminds me of the movie Ghost Dad with Bill Cosby, to believe it or not. In that movie, Bill Cosby's like standing on top of a lamp. He's like sitting on a lamp, and he's sitting on all these high objects like the top of a bookshelf. That movie almost makes me seem like the writer who wrote it, or the director who directed it, whatever, might have known a few things. Because I had the impression that's what the entity was doing. Kind of like a fairy, imp-like creature would do. Just hang out on top of objects that are impossible for a human to sit on. Because they weigh nothing, yet they weigh enough to push down when they want to. And there are a lot of details I've skipped, but I am going to write them down in extreme detail. Hopefully it'll help somebody. Hopefully it'll help other poltergeist victims, but I also want it to help perhaps science in some small way. I know science is going to fully reject this story, but perhaps some people will experience it, and they will have a more open mind and even see it from a scientific perspective. Because I believe they are higher dimensional entities. They're intelligent, independent from us. So that was the attack. That's what happened. Like I said, I would testify to the death. If someone had a gun to my head and said, "Deny that it happened," now that's an extreme scenario. And I might lie in that case and say, "Hey, whatever you say." But if I wanted to stand up for the truth to death, I would say, no, I'm not going to deny it happened. It actually happened. True story. I haven't exaggerated anything. If I wanted to make up a story and exaggerate something, I might say there was a huge vortex with swirling papers all over the place. It was nothing like that. It wasn't like the movie Poltergeist from Steven Spielberg. There was no chairs stacking. It was nothing like that. You know, there's a guy on YouTube that claims that he's being haunted by poltergeists, and I see the chairs stacking. And I'm like, that's so cliche. There's no way I can prove whether he's true or not. But be wary. There's a lot of hoaxers and fraudsters and fakers out there. I'm not one of them. I'm telling the truth. I can't prove it. It's a personal fact. But it's a personal fact I'm going to take to the grave. So I thank you for watching. This has been John Razimus with Pyramidikal. Be seeing you.
Subscribe.